Okay, I've been meaning to do a lessons learned video on my canoe build, just for people who haven't done it before and might be interested in doing it. Um, and so I'm just going to go through a little list of about, I think, the 10 things I thought I probably would do differently if I were to do this again. Um, so here we go. So I think the first thing is it took me a lot of time, a lot of extra time is just not using the right length of wood. I think I got with the original knotty Western red cedar I got from the power pole. Um, it I think was in 10 or 11 foot lengths, and then the longest I could get from my lumber supplier was 14 foot lengths. So I really needed about 17 or 18 foot lengths. I mean, it's obviously something you want to go long on if you can, because of course it's going to be longer than the canoe because of the bend in the hull here. Not a lot, but I mean, it's a 16-foot canoe, so probably 17 foot would have done it, 18 for sure. Anyhow, so I would certainly have used the right length of lumber. And then when I started getting lumber at the lumber yard for it, I got 1x4s and just clear Western red cedar. And basically what I had to do with that is rip it in 1 inch widths, and then rip it down again to get the right height, because it was only 3/4 of an inch high, and I wanted to use 1 inch strips. So so I think that's important. I would have probably got 5/4 stock. If I were doing it again, and that way I could have just ripped it once into a lot of different strips, and would have probably had a ton of less waste overall. So that's really the first couple of things. Don't use knotty lumber. You know, uh, I ended up cutting those Western red cedar from the power pole down to, in many cases as small as 3 foot lengths, and then having to scarf those all together, and it just took a tremendous amount of time. So, again, just get the right length, get it in a nice clear, lumber. Either Western red cedar, or I've seen a lot of people do redwood, or any number of lightweight, low rot, wood. Um, the next real big problem I had was my fiberglass. The fiberglass supplier I used was a marine distributor, and I would get it from a fiberglass supplier who will ship it on a roll. That way, you're just going to have a lot better fiberglass, uh, you know, better quality of a fiberglass that you're ready to start working with, and then get it in the appropriate width for your hull, so you don't have to double it up. In my case, I doubled it up for throughout most of the hull, anyhow. And while it's a nice sturdy canoe, it's quite a lot heavier than it needs to be. I think one layer of fiberglass is plenty strong. And it takes a whole lot more epoxy to fill in all that weave. So I think it's just a lot less expensive. It's probably just as good to do it with one layer of fiberglass. But if you really do want to double up your fiberglass in certain areas to strengthen your keel or something like that, then just make a strip that covers the width of your keel. Just to have that extra durability in fiberglass. Everywhere there's a sharp angle that you have to glass over. Make sure you take some thickened epoxy and fill it around that angle so it's a nice smooth curve for the fiberglass to sort of flow over. Otherwise, you're going to get bubbles. You might get pulling in your fabric. And ultimately, in my case, I got that, and I got it around the stems specifically, and so I'm gonna kind of get real close here and show you what happens here is because because of that. I had to drill some tiny holes, 1/8 inch holes, and I used a syringe and injected into those air bubbles some polyur or some epoxy to get that to kind of dissolve that air bubble and just kind of fill it with epoxy underneath the fiberglass. So so I think that's really important, something I didn't spend enough time doing. I didn't know if I wanted that look to fill it like that, and I think it was much better to probably do that than it was to have the air bubbles and have to go through and it's a little bit unsightly to have those little pinholes in there that are they're right along the bottom, along the keel edge, so it's not like it's very visible above water, but it's meant to be a nice looking thing, and that's one area that it could have been nicer. Use a helper when you're doing your interior. I don't think you really need it when you're fiberglassing your exterior of your hull. I did it all on myself, and it turned out pretty good, I think. Didn't really have a lot of issues with air bubbles other than around those stem bands. So that went pretty well. And I did have a little bit of help on the interior of my hull, but not a lot. And I probably needed like a full-time assistant during that segment. It was pretty frustrating to me, especially up inside the bow and the stern. And I had some, pull away where there became air bubbles underneath the fiberglass. And I think if I'd had someone helping me, and if I had gone with just a single layer of fiberglass, it would have, been a lot better, I believe. So the stem bands, get covered with a brass, a piece of brass. It looks like that, and you can see I've countersunk in some bronze screws, and the problem with that is when you drill holes in that little thin piece of brass, as you're bending it, it snaps. So if you don't have, if I were you, I think I would get maybe 1 or 2 more strips just in case. I ended up soldering it together like a piece of plumbing. But again, it's a little bit unsightly. But it just was a sort of a heartbreaking thing when you're building it. And I think if you'd had an extra piece, that might have been better, easier to use, a fully formed piece rather than one you had to kind of solder together. So, and the other thing is maybe drill the holes after the stem band has been bent and formed around the canoe, and that might be a little tricky, because it'll obviously be curved and be a little bit harder to drill on a any kind of flat surface. But I think it might have been easier to form it to the hull and then drill it, countersink it, and then put those bronze screws in. And the other thing is I think the bronze screws I had were a little bit too big for that. And I ended up actually grinding the heads off on the edges of the heads, because they were kind of sharp and sticking out. Probably if I'd had a little smaller screw, it would have, just fit right down in the countersink, and I wouldn't have had to take that extra step. Anyhow, that's that was kind of a moment of grief for me when I was, almost done with the canoe and I snapped that thing. And if I'd had an extra one, it would have, just been move on and apply the next piece. And then the only other thing I think, in my estimation, that was a little bit of a disappointment is, I tried to, well, not tried to, I did. I used a stapleless process rather than stapling through and having all the little dots that are created by stapling. But I can see the upside to using staples is that once you push your board into place and you clamp it down and you staple it, it's where it is. Where with the process of doing a stapleless construction, you may be bending and pushing your strips into place as you're gluing them, and think you've got them clamped in and nice and snug, and come to find out after everything's dried that it didn't quite all glue together as tightly as you'd like. And there's this one. See this little wider section here is once I process of sanding and planing and everything, sort of sanded off that little thin bead and cove and revealed a gap. And so that became a lot of difficulty in terms of filling. And of course, I guess it's pretty noticeable if you know what you're looking for. If you don't, it probably doesn't. First glance at it, you probably look at it and go, no big deal, or not even notice it. But I think just avoiding that altogether would be best. And the areas that seemed to open up to me were right at where the hole was bulging, between the curve of the side to the bottom of the canoe. And so I think it just have a little more patience, make sure you've put those joints together firmly, that they're nicely clamped in place and clamped in place until the glue has had a chance to cure, so that they just don't come apart. And I think you'll have a lot less of that issue when you're sanding and planing to get a fair curve in your hull. And I ended up filling that with thickened epoxy, filling any of those areas like that came up, and it's certainly going to be watertight, because of course it's behind the fiberglass sandwich between the fiberglass and and epoxy, etc. So it's watertight. It's not extraordinarily noticeable, but it took a lot of extra time, and it is noticeable. So at least to me as the maker, and so again, one thing I would have done differently is just take a little extra time when I was putting together my strips. Anyhow, so those are 10 things that I think I would have done differently when building this boat. And I think it's important, if you do any major project that you've never done before, that after the fact you kind of sit down and think about the things you might have done differently. Just so if you ever do it again, or if you ever do any kind of similar type project, that you have those things in the bank, and don't repeat the same errors that you made. So anyhow, thanks for watching the series, and I'm going to probably start off with a couple of other things now. We actually just bought a camper, and so probably going to do a few things relative to the camper. on the channel. And, you know, I've got a few other woodworking things that I've already got in the can that I just haven't edited or, you know, gotten prepared to put out on the channel. So some more to come. Thanks.